Historically, if there was ever a need for social distancing, it was quite literally lonely. Today, we're very lucky that we live in a world where technology has the ability to bring us together. So we're going to take advantage of the incredible technology to bring each other together for the sake of learning some Torah. So God willing, in the merit of the additional Torah that we learn, and through all of us coming together through the medium of technology, to unite together as a community, to pray, to learn, and to do mitzvahs together, that God should send the healing speedily and should eradicate the coronavirus and all other sicknesses, and we should not only get back to normal, but we should get back to the real normal, the true normal, which is the coming of Mashiach speedily in our day. So we're going to take advantage of the time that we have together to learn some Mishnayos. I'm posting a link so you could actually follow along as well on Sefaria.com. We're going to learn the first chapter of the Mishnayos of the Mitzvah of Pesachim. We're about a month before Pesach, so the timing works really well. Learn a little Mishnayos, has to do with Pesach, and we'll learn some interesting things that have some relevant application as well. So we begin with the first Mishnah. Zog Helike Mishnah or La'aber Asar Boitken Asa Chametz L'Araner. That on the evening of the 14th of Nisan, we must search for Chametz. So the 14th of Nisan is going to take place on Tuesday, April 7th, if I'm not mistaken, and you have to search the Chametz beginning with 7:55 p.m. and afterwards. Now, why do we have to search for Chametz at that time? We have to search for Chametz because it's prohibited for us to own Chametz during Pesach, and we're obligated to remove Chametz from our house. So therefore, our sages instituted that on the evening before the holiday of Pesach, we actually search and check and examine our houses to see if there's any chametz left, to make sure that we fulfill the mitzvah. How do we search for the chametz? We search for the chametz with a candle. Utilizing a candle, and specifically at night in the dark, that gives us the ability to make sure that we search every corner, every crevice, every crack, and we're able to see it in the clearest way. If we did it by day, we would not have the advantage of utilizing the light of the candle directly on every single item. Now, where do you have to search for chametz? So it says kol makom she'en machnisim bechametz ein tzarich bedika. Any place into which chametz is not brought does not require research. So this is a very important rule as we are all going to prepare ourselves to search chametz in a few weeks. We only search for chametz in places and locations where we know that we actually brought chametz. If we did not bring any chametz to that location, we do not need to search it. The searching for chametz is not about spring cleaning, rather it specifically has to do with actually searching for chametz. No chametz, if you never brought chametz in there, don't need to search it. So based on this principle that if you didn't bring chametz in there, you don't need to search it, the Mishnah continues with the question. V'lama amru shtei shuras b'martev. So why have the sages said that 2 rows of a wine cellar must be searched? A wine cellar is not a location that someone is going to bring chametz. Why would the sages say that you have to search a wine cellar? So the Mishnah answers, makam shemachnisin by chametz, that the sages are referring to a place where chametz is brought. There are 2 types of wine cellars. A person might have a commercial wine cellar where you're utilizing it strictly for the purposes of running a business. Not likely that you're going to have chametz there. But if a person has a wine cellar in their house, it's very likely that a person could have been eating something and went down to grab another bottle of wine, so that's the type of location that you still have to search for chametz. Beis Shammai oimrim shtei shuros al pnei kol hamartev. Now Beis Shammai wants to define what are these 2 rows that have to be searched in a wine cellar. So he says 2 rows over the entire front of the wine cellar must be searched. So what does that mean? That there are 2 ways that the Gemara looks at it. Either the first 2 rows, row 1 and row 2, going to the depth of the wine cellar and spanning all the way across. Another way of looking at it is 1 row would mean from the floor to the ceiling, and a second row would be from the top row going all the way to the depth of the room. But either way, according to Beis Shammai, right, Beis Shammai says 2 rows going all the way the width and the length of the cellar. Ubeis Hillel oimrim shtei shuras hachitzonius sheheid elyonos But Beis Hillel says the 2 outer rows, which are the uppermost. So according to Beis Hillel, he says you don't have to search the entire first 2 rows from floor to ceiling. Rather, you just have to search the top 2 rows. Let's go to the Mishnah Beis, the second Mishnah. Zog Delika Mishnah. Ein choyshet neshama greda chaluda mebayis labayis memakom lemakom. Now, how crazy do we have to be when it comes to searching the house for chametz? How sure can we be that we did a good job and there's no chametz left in the house? The Mishnah says we need not be concerned that a weasel or a rat or various animals may have dragged chametz from house to house or from place to place. Dim kain mechatzer lechatzer meir leir ein ledavar saif. For if you're going to be worried that after I finish cleaning, some type of animal took chametz from some other location and brought it into my house, then we would have to be concerned from courtyard to courtyard and from town to town, and there will be no end to the matter. If we had this concern, you never will be able to be satisfied and to be sure that your house is clean for Pesach, because there always could be that an animal brought chametz from some other location into your clean house, being that it's impossible. Therefore, the Mishnah says we don't have to worry about it at all. So what this means is you don't have to use your video camera or your Nest doorbell to see if a raccoon or a skunk was eating a bagel next to your house. All right, we move on to the third Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer boitkin or ba'arba asar u'ba'arba asar shachris u'b'shasabir. Rabbi Yehuda says we must search on the evening of the 14th, or on the morning of the 14th. What if you forget, if somehow you're not able to check on the evening of the 14th? The obligation is still there. You have to search for chametz, so you forgot at night, so search in the morning. Or at the time of the removal. He says even up to the time where the prohibition of eating chametz comes into play, and that you have to actually burn it and destroy it, you have to search chametz up to that moment. Once that moment passes, then you have missed the mitzvah to search for your chametz, and you're no longer obligated to search. However, our sages said, if you didn't search for chametz on the 14th, the night of the 14th, then you have to search on the day of the 14th. And what if you didn't search for chametz even on the morning of the 14th? Then you're obligated to still search for chametz even on the holiday of Pesach itself. You're obligated to still search for that chametz. And what if you didn't search for chametz during the holiday of Pesach? The Mishnah says, you're still obligated to continue to search for any chametz that may have been in your possession during the holiday of Pesach, even after Pesach. 2 days, 3 days, a week after Pesach, you're still obligated to search for that chametz. Why? You could say Pesach is already over. You're allowed to eat chametz. The answer is it's prohibited for a Jew to own chametz on Pesach. Because it's prohibited for a Jew to own chametz on Pesach, therefore you have to search for and remove and eradicate any chametz that was in your possession even on Pesach as well. Now the Gemara says, let's go back to the night of B'dikas Chametz, the night of the 14th. Umasha Mishayer. What about the chametz that you set aside either to eat later that night or to eat for breakfast on the 14th? So you searched your house to remove all the chametz. Nevertheless, there's some chametz that you purposefully set aside for breakfast on the next day. It says Yanuchenel B'tzina. You have to hide it. You have to make sure that you put it somewhere very specific, very clear. Because if you forget where you put that chametz, you're going to have a big problem. You're going to still be obligated to search for that chametz on the morning of the 14th, the afternoon, even during Pesach itself, and even afterwards. So the Mishnah says very clearly, set aside your breakfast, make sure you know where your breakfast is, and make sure that you eat it properly before Pesach. In order to understand the fourth Mishnah, we need a little bit of a background. There's something that's called Jewish time. Now, Jewish time does not mean that you always come late. Right? Jewish time means that we take the daylight hours of the day and we divide that into 12. Each one of those hours is called Jewish time. If sunrise is at 6 a.m. and sunset is at 6 p.m., so then you're going to have perfect 12 60-minute hours. However, that is most usually not the case. So Jewish time, there could be an hour that's less than 60 minutes, and there could be an hour that's more than 60 minutes. So the Mishnah says, like a Mishnah, Rabbi Meir Oimrim, Oichlin Kal Chamish, V'sor from the Sheish. Rabbi Meir says, how does this procedure work? The procedure works is that on the morning of the 14th, the morning of Erev Pesach, the 14th of Nisan, you are allowed to eat the entire 5th hour. The 5th hour of the day, if 6 a.m. is going to be sunrise, is going to be 11 a.m. So until 11 a.m. you're going to be able to eat, and then you have to burn the chametz right at the beginning of the 6th hour. Even though the 6th hour is 12 o'clock, right at the beginning of the 6th hour, which already is going to be 11:01, then you have to burn the chametz. Now, why do you have to burn the chametz already at 11:01 when it's not prohibited to eat chametz until 12 p.m.? The answer is very simple. We don't want to make a mistake. Today we have a clock. Today we know the time exactly, but of course in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, it was much more difficult to tell time in an exact way. So we did not want to make a mistake. We did not want to make an error. So therefore, right at the beginning of that hour, we want to make sure that people are burning their chametz. Rabbi Yehuda says, Oichlin kol arba. Rabbi Yehuda says you can eat through the 4th hour, which that would be 10 a.m. V'toilin kol chamesh. However, in the 5th hour, between 10 and 11, you're not allowed to eat the chametz, and you're not obligated to burn the chametz. V'sarfim b'chila sheish, and then you're going to burn the chametz at the beginning of the 6th hour. So how does that work today? So the Erev Pesach this year, the conclusion of the 4th hour is 10:41 a.m. So you're allowed to eat chametz until 10:41. Between 10:41 and 11:47, you are not allowed to eat the chametz, and you're not obligated to burn the chametz. However, 12:50, so at 11:47, that begins the 6th hour. We are then obligated to burn the chametz, and 12:53, having chametz becomes completely prohibited. All right, the 5th Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda also said, actually we need a little bit of background before we look at the 5th Mishnah as well. So during the times of the Beis HaMikdash, there was an offering that had to be brought that was called the Thanksgiving offering, the Todah offering. It was brought it was brought as an expression of thanks. If a person got out of a very dangerous situation, you crossed the desert, you crossed the sea, you got out of prison, you went through a life-saving experience. The same mitzvah applies today, that if a person flew overseas, if a person got out of the hospital after a life-threatening illness, or survived a dangerous car crash, you would have to go to the shul and make the gomel bracha. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, part of the offering that you had to bring was 40 loaves of bread. 10 of those loaves were chametz, and 4 of them were actually given to the Kohen to eat. Now, the way this particular sacrifice worked, that you brought the sacrifice during the day, and you had until midnight in order to be able to eat the loaves. Once midnight came, the loaves are prohibited to be eaten. A secondary rule is, in order for an offering to be acceptable, there has to be at least theoretically possible for you to be able to eat the loaves before midnight. If for some reason that time is going to be cut off, you're not allowed to bring an offering at that time. So what happens if a person wanted to bring a Todah offering on Erev Pesach, on the morning of the 14th of Nisan? They got a big problem. The problem is that at the 6th hour, it's prohibited to have chametz anymore. You're not going to be able to eat the offering until midnight, therefore you're not able to bring the Thanksgiving offering on the 14th of Nisan. So because that was the case, there was a huge rush that on the 13th of Nisan, everyone was bringing Todah offerings. So many people bringing Todah offerings, so many people were eating Todah offerings. Inevitably, there was going to be some loaves of bread that were left over past midnight that were not eaten, and that became disqualified. Now in the Torah, we don't waste anything. Therefore, as sages said, if we have this bread that is otherwise perfectly acceptable, but we are not allowed to eat it because it became disqualified because of a sacrifice, we're going to utilize it in the performance of a mitzvah. Don't let anything go to waste, and it was utilized to signal when and how the Jews were able to eat chametz and when to burn the chametz. So that's the background for the Mishnah, Mishnah number 5. Zog delek Mishnah, v'oid, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda also said, Shtei chalish shel toida psoilis menuchas al gag yitztaba. 2 loaves of thanksgiving offering, which had become unfit, were placed on the roof of the portico. So on the morning of the 14th of Nisan, 2 loaves of bread, which were chametz, that became disqualified from a Toda offering that was brought on the 13th of Nisan, was placed on the roof of the covers of the benches that were on the Temple Mount. So surrounding the Temple Mount, there were areas where people could sit. There were benches that were covered for sun, for rain, and the challahs were put on top of that because people can see them from afar. The temple, of course, was on a mountain. It was very visible from many places. People could see the loaves of bread that were on top of these roofs, and were really great for signaling. Kol zman shemunachos, as long as there were 2 loaves sitting on top of the roofs, kol ha'am oichlin, everyone is able to eat chametz. Not la'achas toilin. When the Kohanim removed one of the loaves, that was the signal that you're no longer allowed to eat chametz. You don't have to burn the chametz yet, but you're no longer allowed to eat the chametz. Loy oichlin v'loy sarchlin, so no eating and no burning chametz. However, you were allowed to feed chametz to your animals at that time. Nitlu shtehen hischilu kol ha'am sarfin. However, when both of the loaves were removed, now the Jewish people know that was the signal to start burning the chametz. Rabban Gamliel said, Chulin ne'echlin kol arba. Right? Rabban Gamliel said that your typical food that doesn't have any sanctified holy status, you're allowed to eat to the 4th hour, which means again till 10 o'clock. Utruma kol chamesh. However, truma is special gifts that had to be given to the Kohen. Only a Kohen was allowed to eat it. The Jewish people are obligated to separate truma from their produce, and it attained a status of holiness, and only Kohanim were able to eat it. So during the 5th hour, the Kohanim got an extra hour for them to be able to eat their truma that was chametz. Why did they get an extra hour? For a very simple reason, right? The Torah says you're not allowed to destroy truma because it's holy. Now, if you have to destroy it because Pesach is coming, you'd be allowed. But we don't go with the 4th hour, where you get an extended hour up until the 5th hour that you're able to destroy that you're able to eat the truma. V'sorfin b'tchilas sheish. Ramaguil says either way, whether it's chametz, or whether it's truma, at the beginning of the 6th hour, it must be burnt. Now we need a little bit of an introduction to the 6th and the 7th Mishnah as well. The Mishnah is going to essentially ask the question that when it comes to burning truma and regular chametz, are you allowed to burn them in the same fire pit, or are you obligated to separate them and burn them in 2 separate fire pits? What would the logic be? Truma is holy. Not only are you not allowed to destroy it, but you're not allowed to contaminate it. You're not allowed to make it impure. You're not allowed to mix it with other types of food that are not sanctified or not holy. So the question is, do we say that they're both being burnt anyway, so we can burn them together in one fire? Or do we say, no, we cannot contaminate the truma with regular chametz, and we have to burn them separately? In order to come to a resolution, we're going to try to bring a proof from a different case. And that's where Mishnah 6 begins. Zog delek Mishnah Rebbe Chanina Sagan HaKoyanim Oymar. So Rebbe Chanina, one way of translating this, he was the assistant to the Kohen Gadol, which means he was the 2nd most important Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash. Another way of translating it is that he was actually the administrator of the Kohanim. Either way, he held a very important position in the Beis HaMikdash. He says, "Mi mehem shel kayanim lo nimnu milisrei fesabasar shnitma mevladatuma im abasar shnitma ba'avatuma." Says, in all the days the Kohanim never did they refrain from burning sacrificial meat that they had been contaminated by secondary tuma, together with sacrificial meat that had been contaminated by a primary tuma. even though by doing so they added contamination to its contamination. So without getting into the details of the law, the case that Rabbi Chanina ben Sagana Kohanim mentions is that the Kohanim never were worried about burning things together that were of two different levels of impurity, even though by burning them together you were going to increase the level of impurity of the other product. They were never worried about it. It was not an issue. Rabbi Kiva Amar. Rabbi Kiva added and says, never did the Kohanim refrain from lighting oil that had become unfit through contact with a tivul yoim in a lamp that had been contaminated by a corpse. So one of the methods that a person could become pure in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the person was obligated to go to the mikveh during the day. However, they did not become officially pure until nightfall. So if after a person went to the mikveh during the day, but before the time of nightfall, they touched this oil, they were still impure, and therefore the oil would become impure. Nevertheless, they did not refrain from lighting that oil that became impure through the contact with the tivul yoim in a lamp that had been contaminated by a corpse. So they would still use that oil which was impure in a lamp that came impure by one who touched the dead body, which is the most severe form of impurity. So by using that impure oil, you were adding to the level of impurity. Nevertheless, they did it. Although by doing so, they added contamination to its contaminations. So the Mishnah brings two cases where we see that we're not concerned about adding contamination to something. Therefore, in Mishnah number 7, the suggestion is going to be made that perhaps there's no problem burning Chametz and Truma together, because there should be no worry about adding in contamination. So Zog, like a Mishnah number 7, Amar Rabbi Meir midivrayim lamdeinu shesarfin Truma tahirim tameh b'Pesach. Rabbi Meir said that from the words we infer that we may burn uncontaminated Truma, which is Chametz, with contaminated Truma on Erev Pesach, and we are not worried about it. Amar Rabbi Yosi. However, Rabbi Yosi responds, and he says, Eina hi amida. You cannot learn one from the other at all, because they're two completely different cases. In the other two cases that we were dealing with two items that were already impure, one of a higher level of impurity and one of a lower level of impurity. And the conclusion was, we're not worried about adding impurity, because at the end of the day, both of those things are impure already. But when it comes to taking Truma, which is pure, right, and Chametz, which is contaminated, you're going to introduce contamination to Truma that you're not allowed to do. In the other case, they were both already impure, so it wasn't a problem. But here, you're not going to be allowed to introduce impurity into the pure Truma, and they would have to be burned separately. Even Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua concurred that each is burned separately. Concerning where do they differ? Where is there a dispute whether you can burn them together or not? Ala tluya v'ala tmeya. When there's a doubt as to whether it is in fact impure or not. Rabbi Elazar omer tisarev zula atzma v'zula atzma. According to Rabbi Elazar, he says that you would burn them separately. You would burn it separately. Rabbi Yeshua Imer Shten Kachas, or Rabbi Yeshua, he in fact would allow them to be burned together because there's a doubt of whether it's impure or it's not impure. All right. So we have successfully learned chapter 1 of the Mishnah of Tractate Pesachim. I hope this gave you some insight into some of the observances surrounding the search for Chametz. And God willing, next week on Monday, we'll go forward with chapter 2. Have a fabulous and wonderful week. And God willing, each day of the week, we're going to be posting more and more material.